Your cat may be quietly healing its own bones every time it purrs. Its favorite plant might secretly be insect repellent. It already knows its name, and it's choosing to ignore you. 50 facts about your cat, starting now. No single story this time, just 50 real, specific facts, counting up fast. Stick around for number 33 especially. It might change how you look at your cat's favorite toy forever. Let's go. Start with the senses, because almost everything else about a cat's behavior traces back to them. A cat's whiskers aren't just facial hair. They're rooted in deep, nerve-rich follicles, and they span roughly the width of the cat's own body, working like a built-in ruler for judging whether a gap is worth attempting. Its hearing is even more extreme. Cats can pick up frequencies up to roughly 64,000 hertz, while humans top out around 20,000, which means a cat can hear a mouse rustling in the wall long before you'd ever notice. In near darkness, a cat needs only a fraction of the light a human does to see clearly, thanks to a reflective layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum, the same layer that makes their eyes glow under a flashlight. They even have a second, semi-transparent eyelid called a nictitating membrane that sweeps sideways across the eye to protect it during a fight or a hunt without fully closing. Smell might be the most underrated sense of all. A cat's nose carries far more scent receptors than ours, tens of millions, compared to about 5 million in a human nose. And when a cat catches a particularly strong scent, it sometimes opens its mouth slightly into an odd grimace called the feline response, routing that scent to a second organ on the roof of the mouth built specifically to analyze pheromones. Strangely though, cats can't taste sweetness at all. At some point, they lost the working gene for that receptor entirely, which actually tracks for an animal that survives purely on meat and never needed a sweet tooth. Their field of view spans about 200 degrees, wider than a human's roughly 180, even though they're worse than we are at picking out fine detail up close. And touch matters more than people realize too. Each paw pad carries its own dense cluster of nerves, which is part of why cats move with such precision across narrow ledges, and why they barely sweat through their skin at all. Almost all of it happens through those same paw pads, which is why a stressed cat at the vet sometimes leaves faint, damp footprints on the table. Move from sensing the world to talking about it, and the story gets stranger. Adult cats almost never meow at each other. In the wild, adult wild cats rely on scent and body language with rivals, not vocal calls, since meowing at another cat is really a kitten-to-mother behavior. Domestic cats seem to have kept that kitten call and aimed it at us instead. Researchers comparing house cats to their closest wild relatives found that domestic cat meows are far more varied, shaped generation after generation by an audience that actually responds to sound. Purring might be even stranger. It sits mostly in the 25 to 150 hertz range, a range that overlaps almost exactly with frequencies used in medical vibration therapy for bone and tissue healing, which has led some researchers to a genuinely striking hypothesis that purring might be a form of self-repair, not just contentment. That idea gets support from an odd detail. Cats purr when they're happy, but also when they're injured, frightened, or even dying, which a simple purring equals happy explanation can't really account for. Slow blinking, meanwhile, really does work like a kind of cat kiss. A 2020 study found cats are more likely to approach a person, even a total stranger, right after that person slow blinks at them. And cats often blink back. Cats also recognize their own names, even spoken by someone unfamiliar, according to research out of Japan. They just don't always feel obligated to respond to what they clearly heard.
Then there's body language. Kneading, that rhythmic paw-pressing thing on blankets or laps, is left over from kittenhood, when kittens knead against their mother while nursing to help milk flow. Plenty of adult cats never grow out of the motion. Rubbing a cheek against a door frame or your ankle isn't affection alone either. Cats have scent glands in their cheeks, and that rub leaves a chemical signature marking the spot and you as familiar territory. Even the tail works almost like a mood readout. Straight up usually means confident and friendly. Puffed out means it feels threatened. And a low, fast twitch at the tip often means its patience is about to run out. Put it all together, and a cat is running an entire second language, mostly built for us, mostly wordless, and mostly things you've been half reading your whole life without realizing it. Underneath all of that is a predator, and the hunting instinct explains a lot of what looks like random behavior. A house cat's hunting sequence is essentially identical to a lion's. Stalk low, freeze, creep closer, then a short explosive chase, a pounce, and a precise bite. Scale is really the only difference. That exact sequence is what's happening when a cat attacks a toy on a string. Play in cats isn't random energy. It's the predatory sequence running on a target that isn't actually food. Even the strange habit of bringing you a dead mouse, or worse, a live one, fits the pattern. Some researchers think a cat delivering prey to a person is treating that person like a kitten that still needs hunting lessons. That predator lifestyle also explains the sleep. Cats sleep between 12 and 20 hours a day, more than almost any other mammal. And as an ambush predator, built for short, explosive bursts rather than long chases, conserving energy between hunts is really the entire strategy. Their bodies are built for the bursts too. A falling cat rights itself using something called the righting reflex, using an extremely flexible spine and no functional collarbone to twist its front and back halves independently in midair and land feet first. Veterinary data on cats that fell from apartment buildings even found something counterintuitive. Cats that fell from higher floors sometimes had better survival odds than ones that fell from a middle floor. And one theory is that extra falling distance gives a cat more time to right itself and relax its body before impact. The rest of the toolkit is just as specialized. Whiskers can experience something like fatigue, constantly overstimulate them, brushing against the sides of a too small food bowl, for instance, and a cat can become genuinely irritated by the sensation. Polydactyl cats, born with extra toes, aren't just a quirk either. The wider paw can act almost like a built-in snowshoe, and sailors historically prized them for exactly that kind of sure-footedness on a moving deck. Even the claws are purpose-built, retracting specifically to stay razor-sharp for hunting and climbing, since pulling them up off the ground while walking means they're never dulled by contact with rough surfaces. Whiskers, night vision, retractable claws, the pounce reflex, every piece of it evolved for a solitary ambush predator that needed to win a fight in under 2 seconds, not outlast anything in a long chase. None of that works without a surprisingly capable mind behind it. Cats form a mental map of an object's location even after it's hidden from view, a concept called object permanence. And most cats can track a toy through multiple hidden moves, a skill that develops fully around 8 weeks old. Researchers have even built a 5-trait framework for cat personality, nicknamed the Feline 5. How outgoing a cat is, how skittish, how dominant, how spontaneous, and how friendly toward people. And every cat lands somewhere different across all 5. Here's the one worth remembering, though. Cats rubbing their face against catnip or silver vine isn't just a recreational high. A 2021 study found that the rubbing transfers the plant's compound directly onto the cat's fur. And that compound is a genuine mosquito repellent. Cats may have stumbled onto bug spray for themselves purely by instinct thousands of years before we invented our own. That same compound triggers the same brain reward pathway in a cat that opioids trigger in humans, which is the actual chemical reason behind the glassy-eyed rolling around reaction, though not every cat responds to it at all. Sensitivity is inherited, and roughly a third of cats carry a version of the gene that simply doesn't react.
The rest of a cat's mind is just as individual. Cats can be trained the same way dogs can, using rewards, but they tend to extinguish and relearn behaviors faster, and they're famously less interested in performing a trick purely because a human wants them to. In multi-cat households, they can distinguish their own name from another cat's name entirely, not just from ordinary words, meaning each cat is tracking an individual identity rather than a generic call sound. They even form real attachment bonds with their owners, structurally similar to how human infants bond with a caregiver, according to attachment-style research adapted from child psychology. And despite that bond, cats retain something dogs mostly lost through selective breeding: near total behavioral independence. A cat can, and sometimes does, choose to walk away from a person entirely and survive perfectly well without one. All of this is running in a brain roughly the size of a walnut, which is proof enough that raw brain size was never really the point.
Zoom out to the bigger picture, and cats have one of the strangest origin stories of any animal living in our homes. Cats domesticated themselves. Roughly 10,000 years ago, in the Fertile Crescent, wild cats moved in near the earliest grain stores, chasing the rodents the grain attracted, and the least fearful ones simply stuck around. Nobody selectively bred the first cats on purpose. Genetically, a modern house cat is remarkably close to that original wildcat. Compare that to a dog and a wolf, which look and behave dramatically differently after thousands of years of deliberate breeding, and the contrast is stark. Recent DNA research has actually complicated that tidy version of the story, too. Newer evidence points to North African wildcat populations and multiple separate waves of contact with humans, not one clean domestication event in one place. Once that relationship took hold, it got intense fast. In ancient Egypt, killing a cat, even by accident, could carry the death penalty. Cats were mummified, buried in cat-specific cemeteries, and linked directly to the goddess Bastet. Selective breeding did eventually catch up in some places. The largest commonly recognized domestic cat breed, the Savannah, comes from crossing a domestic cat with a serval, a wild African cat, and the result can stand nearly as tall at the shoulder as a small dog. The oldest verified domestic cat on record lived to 38 years old, more than 5 times the average lifespan of an outdoor cat. And for the record, a group of cats is called a clowder, a group of kittens is a kindle, and feral cats do form loose colonies, usually built around groups of related females raising kittens together, while males roam much larger territories, overlapping several colonies at once. One last piece of anatomy ties a lot of this together. A cat's collarbone floats freely instead of connecting to other bones, which is a major reason cats can squeeze through gaps that look far too narrow for their body. So the next time your cat goes berserk over a piece of catnip, remember, it's not just getting high. It might be the one everyday moment where you're watching an animal accidentally invent its own insect repellent, purely by instinct, without knowing why it even works at all. 50 facts. And somehow, the biggest thread running through almost all of them is this: Your cat isn't really that far from the wild animal it started as. It didn't get bred into a new shape the way a dog did. It just decided, about 10,000 years ago, that hanging around humans was a good trade. And it's been quietly running its own instincts on us, mostly unchanged, ever since. Tell us in the comments which fact actually surprised you. And if you want 50 facts about a different animal next, tell us which one. Subscribe if you made it all the way here. You clearly like facts.